So during the election campaign, you said a binding referendum on the treaty principles would be a bottom line in exchange for your party's support in government, an absolute top priority. And yet here we are, a year on, and the only way that we will have a binding referendum is if National agrees to pass your law, which the Prime Minister says explicitly and in the plainest language he will not support. So why do you capitulate on that bottom line?
Well, they also said that there was no way that they'd have any of it. I guess what you found is that you've got two parties, and I think Chris has said the same thing. Neither side's particularly happy with it because no one got everything they wanted. But critically, what we have allowed is...
This is your number one priority during the campaign. All of those people who supported our Act did so knowing that your absolute top priority was, the bottom line was a binding referendum. And here we are, you're in government, and we don't have one.
Well, what we do have is a bill that is finally going to democratise what the treaty principles...
It's the wrong bill we want to hear about, Mr. Seymour. The bill is $4 million. For this waste of time. That's the only bill that matters, to be frank.
Mean because for a long time, unless you're a judge or on the Waitangi Tribunal or an academic or a public servant, you don't get much say on what our founding document means. For the first time...
I love that statement.
What the fuck?
Yeah, you don't get much say. Like, could you imagine in America if it was like, well, everyone of the public needs to decide what the amendments in the Constitution, if they should all decide. Like, you know what, Seymour, you're right. We don't all get a say on our founding document. It's a founding document between two parties. You don't get to rewrite the whole thing and have 5 million people sign off on it. It doesn't work that way, shall we?
Yeah, I wasn't there. My name's not on it. I wasn't a representative of Queen Victoria either. I don't expect a democratic say in the Treaty of Waitangi. What a ridiculous position that is going to play well with his support.
Yeah.
But absolutely makes zero sense to anyone with even just a skerrick of a brain.
Yeah. All right, keep going.
Jesus.
And we're going to democratise the debate on that. Now, is that as far as I'd like to go? No. Has it significantly changed the debate? Yes, and you can see that because of the reaction you're getting from all these people who don't want the great unwashed to be able to have a say about our constitutional future.
We'll talk about the process once the bill is introduced. What is the risk if we don't go through this process and have this debate?
I think the risk is that we increasingly adopt a version of the treaty which says it's a partnership between races. That's what the Court of Appeal said. It's what the Prime Minister...
It's a partnership between the Crown and iwi. The dog whistling he's doing, it's a partnership between races. So if one of the people who came across and agreed to it was Welsh and one was English and one was Scottish, they signed on behalf of the Crown, the Queen. They didn't sign on behalf of a race. And with the people who were already there, who were the owners of the land. It was an agreement between the owners of the land and the Crown. This dog whistling racial undertones of, I got to signed on based on race. It's just because they were different races doesn't mean it was an agreement based on race. If I moved to a foreign country, if I moved to India and wanted to start up a business, and I started up a business and I signed a document with a group there, a business there, it wouldn't be even though we were different races, it wouldn't be an agreement based on race. It would be an agreement based on the people who were there making the offer and me coming on board and saying, yes, I want to do this. This dog whistling is so revolting.
A version of the treaty which says it's...
Sorry, Joe.
I was just going to say we've had a Prime Minister call us bottom feeders. We've had a Deputy Prime Minister, or soon to be Deputy Prime Minister, refer to most of us as the Great Unwashed.
Yep.
Is this just out the gates arrogance?
Yeah, and it's smarmy, and it's also, I think, what you're saying. One of the problems Seymour has now is getting re-elected, probably holding this government together once he becomes Deputy Prime Minister and trying to become the preeminent number 2 in the right to get rid of Winston. And so he's still speaking to his base and the base he'd like to attract for the next election.
Partnership between races. That's what the Court of Appeal said. It's what the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern repeated 35 years later, sorry. And as a result, we increasingly see ourselves not as human beings and New Zealanders with challenges and choices and problems to solve and overcome, and as we go through our lives, we see each other as Maori or non-Maori. And once you start telling people to think of each other in racial terms, the danger is people will start to actually do it. I feel to some extent they have, and our country's become more divided. I think it's important that we actually say, no, everyone's allowed to have a discussion about this. It's not going to be all terrible. Actually, yes, New Zealanders can have a discussion about our constitutional future. We're going to have that discussion. Will it go as far as we like? Possibly not. On the other hand, as I've said,
You accept that now?
Well, it's possible that they won't, but I also just make the point that I think that this is going to be a lot more positive and uplifting than people believe. And once you see where it gets to, people say, we actually can have a say in our constitutional future. It might end up being a more popular idea than some people expect.
It's great to see David Seymour be a twat on 3 subjects all at once. But I think the most egregious thing here is the positioning that he takes around this reframing of the treaty principles. That this laughable notion that we need everyone in this country to have a democratic say on a treaty that was signed between the Crown and the Indigenous people of
The
this
landowners,
place
people who were here first.
is laughable. Like, I think he's panicking, because the longer this goes on, there is more understanding amongst the general public now about let's say the treaty just as a catch-all, but we're really talking about Titiriti. If someone like me, all the way down here in the South Island, could learn that actually there are 2 treaties and it isn't a direct translation, and under international agreement, it's the one in Toreo that is the important one.
The Indigenous
That's
language.
the one that most people signed.
Yeah.
Then it can get through to any numbskull out there about what we're talking about. But the thing is,
unless they're being disingenuous. If they're being disingenuous, it won't get through. Anyone who chooses to participate in this conversation as an honest actor, let me put it to you this way: if someone from Indonesia signed a contract with someone from France, right, and it was the Indonesian company wanting to say something to the French company, and they wrote the agreement both in Indonesian and in French, the French people are going to understand and sign the French version, because that's what they understood. No difference. In the treaty, both versions, Māori and English, Māori understood the Māori version. The English one, whilst it is a historical document, is basically a paperweight when it comes to law, because that's not the one that Māori understood. Māori understood the one that was in Māori. So that's why that carries more weight. Sorry, Troy.
And just historically, that's the reason why the one in Māori is the one that has the most signatures. There's about 50 signatures on the English translation, and that's purely because they ran out of room, and they just basically said, "Yeah, this is the same thing." Okay, and then we threw it away and let rats chew on it. That's how important it was. It got colonists in the doors, and that's all that matters. But now David Seymour wants to put it up as this is something we should all have a say on. And I think the most dangerous and malicious thing that he's doing here is he's going after immigrants to this country that have zero understanding of this.
Yeah.
And going, if you don't go along with me, you're a second-class citizen to the Māori. Which is just such a bald-faced fucking lie. But he knows that that's where he'll get numbers. What he's scared about is the generations that are coming through school now with a greater understanding of New Zealand history than we have ever had. And he knows that if he leaves it for another generation, there is no way that this is going to fly. You cannot put race relations in this country to a fucking referendum, which is what he wants.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.